You're listening to Montage, and I'd like to welcome Coach Ben Tapscott.
Thanks, Ron, for inviting me.
It's my pleasure, Coach. Now, all of us, everybody in Oakland can see that Oakland is changing right in front of our eyes. But what they might not see happening in the periphery is how it relates to schools. So, Coach, you work a lot with the school board. Tell us, what's happening with the rise of charter schools in Oakland?
Well, black education continues to be under attack. It's a systemic problem in terms of understanding. My fight is not with charter schools because I understand every parent, regardless of their zip code, wants their child to be educated. The fact that people are attending more and more charter schools then reduces the public school attendance, and then we see closures of more and more schools, primarily in the black communities. We have closed 14 black schools. 5 of those black schools have been in West Oakland. We have closed not one Hill school, Ron.
Man, 5 in West Oakland.
One part of the city.
Wow. That's huge. How do these schools compare in student performance, these charter schools versus the public schools?
Well, charter schools basically have an extended day. They handpick and segregate and discriminate in terms of the students they admit. Not all of them, but 90% of them. Our schools are more segregated today than they were 50 years ago. But the fact that they have an extended day, when we look at APIs, which is a standard admitted test, we have found that people are not getting what they think they're getting with charter schools.
What do you mean by an extended day?
90% of them go until 6 in the evening, compared to most public schools ending their school day at 3:30.
Interesting. Okay. So they have these extended days, they have the extra income, and they have the API. That's a standard, that's a rating, that's a performance measure.
By the state of California Department of Education. Now, the big surprise, and I've said this publicly, parents need to really zero in on what's happening in charter schools, primarily because most of them are school for profit. But when you look at the academic performance, 50% of those charter schools are performing below what public schools are showing on their API scores, and that would be a shock to most people out on the street.
It's a shock to me, because you just think that charter schools are just turning out stars.
Yes.
You think they're just cranking them out like with a big crank or something. Interesting. They're not performing as well over half the schools.
As public schools.
My goodness. Actually, that's good to know. How is the funding happening? Okay, we know that our tax dollars are taking care of the public schools. Where is the funding? Is there any public money? I guess I'm asking, I'll just get straight to it. Is there any public money going to charter schools?
The daily attendance, there's so much money generated for every child sitting in a seat at a school. And as those children move from the public schools to the charter school, that money travels with them. In addition to that, now with Prop 39 and LCAP and other funding formulas, charter schools are now vying for the money that used to go to public schools. And the surprise to me when I first got involved with the Oakland Public Schools is many of these schools are taking public school buildings and paying no rent.
So you're saying that the schools that are being closed at some point reopen as charter schools, or are you? Don't let me put words in your mouth.
That's correct. with a lower enrollment in many cases than the school that they displaced. And when you displace a school, you create hardship, particularly, and I want to reiterate, most of these closures, 14 black schools have been closed in Oakland, 1 Latino school, 5 of those schools, and soon to be 6 of those schools, are located in one part of the city, and that's West Oakland.
Wow. Now, what decides the school closure? How does that work? Is that the superintendent solely? Is that a board? What decides that?
The school board in Oakland is bought and paid for by wealthy politicians and wealthy contributors. We have a charter school board in Oakland that continues to vote for more and more opening of charter schools. Oakland has more charter schools in its city than any other city in the state of California.
Wow.
The last time I checked. Seldom does this board say no to charter schools, but Prop 39 is not just for Oakland, it's for the state of California. And I often wonder why other school districts are saying no to charter schools, but Oakland continues to open more and more charter schools.
Now, you've stated that the charter school is not accommodating all of the community kids. When these schools close, I can imagine the charter schools are getting some of that school population of that closed school. But since there's segregation, unlike what we've seen recently, but in the past, when segregation was pretty rampant, you're saying that, I'm asking, where are these school kids going who are not being attracted or articulated into the charter schools? Where are the rest of these kids going to school?
When you look at charter schools and their locations, basically in public school buildings that used to have public school children, you take Marshall for an example. It was the first quote-unquote hill school that was closed, and those kids then were dispensed to surrounding elementary public schools. Grass Valley, for one, was totally destroyed when they closed Marshall. And the other thing in West Oakland is we have no middle schools. We have 1/2 of a middle school because they took part of West Oakland Middle and put a charter school, KIPP, on the other side. Now, in September, they're moving 275 elementary children at Lafayette to bring over a charter school to take that campus that has 315 students. That's disgraceful.
It is. So what did they do? Did they draw a line? No, they probably put a fence up down the middle of the school. How did they segregate?
It's a fence.
School? It's a fence, yes.
And when you also understand that charter schools, many of them, I won't say all of them, do not expect special ed. They handpick the students even though they claim to have open enrollment. But 90% of our charter schools are highly segregated with Asian students and maybe 3 or 4 other races and also Latinos. These schools, if you look at their ethnicity, you will see that they are not integrated even though they claim to be integrated. They are not.
They have the tokens, it sounds like, from back in the day.
Yes.
Interesting. Now, I also see in the charter school areas around lunchtime or a little bit later than the normal lunchtime, kids in groups milling about or en route somewhere. How is that?
Because charter schools are not regulated by the same type of codes that public schools are hampered by. But the fact that our kids are not being educated, and particularly the black students, we're still seeing black males suspended at a higher rate than white students. They're probably 15 times more likely to be suspended. California last year expelled 5,678 students, and most of those were blacks.
Are you kidding? Expelled
in the state of California.
5,000, that's a lot. This is a big state, yes, but
yes,
that's a lot.
That's a lot. And if you look at the ethnicity of those that are expelled, and I'm not saying some of them probably didn't misbehave, but you wonder how many of these kids that are in trouble, and I don't want to excuse their misbehavior, how many of them can read? How many of them finished high school? The Wall Street Journal or the New York Times says that the federal government is estimating future prison growths based on third grade reading scores in this country. And we know in the third grade is when students fall behind in reading. We can do all these other things, but we still cannot educate the black male.
I just don't get it. Well, let me take that back. I do get it. I remember in high school how easy it was to get a demerit because you were a little bit tardy or you were in an area. There always seemed to be some type of double standard. I know you can speak to that.
Equity has always been a concern of mine, and I mentioned earlier that public schools, the type of education that they're getting should not be based on a zip code. Children in the hills should not be receiving a different type of education than kids in West Oakland.
That's right.
The things that they've done, this school board has done, and Jamoke Hodge is our representative on the school board, the things that they've done to West Oakland is a disgrace, and they should be ashamed of themselves. The fact that parents in West Oakland have to get up early in the morning and put their child on BART to send them to another district that has a middle school, because we have now closed 2 middle schools in West Oakland, and then we took half of West Oakland. So that school can handle 40 kids, but we have 4 elementary schools, that's 160 kids that will be looking for a school in September. They have to go across town to find a middle school. The superintendent needs to step up and re-establish public schools at the middle school level in West Oakland like all the other school districts have. You don't go to another district or another neighborhood and find no middle schools for their children to go to. We used to have 2, Hoover and Lowell, when I taught at McClymonds.
And you're right. That's ugly. That's very ugly. My goodness, West Oakland is getting hammered. Wow. And I seem to remember hearing that most of the, I don't know if there's a correlation or not, but most of the schools that are being closed are schools with African American names. Now that's not nice either.
Not by accident either. Barack Obama, Foster, Thurgood Marshall. Those were all named Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Were all named after a black man, and every one of them has been closed or either now is occupied by a charter school with a different name.
Wow. It makes me think those came under the sights first. I don't know, Coach. I wonder about the future of the inner city kids, black kids, at the undereducation or uneducation and the readiness for jobs in the future. And I hate to think about what you were just talking about in terms of the incarceration rate, the line from school to incarceration. Also, I can remember it seemed that back in the day, and I was hoped that this was over, but back in the day it seemed that on the other side of the community went from preschool to kindergarten to elementary school to junior high school to junior college or community college to university to good life, while the other portion went from kindergarten to elementary school, maybe to junior high, to juvenile, to jail, to the joint or the penitentiary, to bad life or death. And it seems like that cycle has come back around again from what I hear you saying, if it's judged on third grade scores.
And we know that. And it continues. 100 years later, it continues.
Wow.
It's a return to slavery for our young people. And our brothers need to stop killing brothers.
Yes.
That is very disheartening to me. I taught at McClymonds, and when I bury some of my ball players, I'm supposed to go before them. And it's happening in the black communities where, for whatever reason, they are not sitting down and trying to talk out whatever the problem is. Mm-hmm. I understand brothers trying to survive. Mm-hmm. I understand that many of them were not educated. The schools are responsible for that. The homelessness that's out there, the schools are responsible for that. If we look at brothers in prison, I would wonder what the study would come back showing, number one, how many of them could read past the third grade level, mm-hmm. and how many of them finished high school. Mm-hmm. So they're getting pushed out, forced out, kicked out, falling between the cracks, being pushed between the cracks. Whatever it is that needs to happen, it's not happening when it comes to educating. And I again focus on the black male.
Oh, man. What do you do? It's kind of bleak. We got to have some beacon, some light of hope. Hopefully, when I have you on again, there'll be a plan from the black community, about the black community, operating in the black community. That's one of the things that I'm for sure going to be working on.
Well, Ron, the biggest thing coming down the road is the November election.
Yes, it is.
We need to get 4 or 5 of those board members off the school board because they are all funded by charter schools' money so that they can control the vote and continue to put more and more charter schools in Oakland.
Did you hear that, folks? You've got some activity to do from this activist, straight from his mouth. You just have a plan. Put it into action. Make the plan. You have the point. Now make the plan. Put that into action, please. Coach Tapscott, is there a way that people can get in touch with you? Can we have your information?
I have an email. Mm-hmm. It's Coach, T as in Tom,
yes,
A as in Apple, P as in Paul, at AOL.com.
Thank
Coach
you.
Tapscott at AOL.com. And thanks again, Ron, for having me.